Fashion show. I never thought I'd be typing this out, let alone admitting it to strangers on some magazine. But here I am, hands shaking, heart pounding, because if I don't get this out, it'll eat me alive. My name doesn't matter, let's just say I'm Fiona and I am a girl from a town so small everyone knew your business before you did. I was 20, with hair so blonde it looked like spun sugar and a mouth that never knew when to shut up. Daddy always said my smart remarks would land me in trouble, and boy, was he right. Uncle John, though he wasn't blood, just a friend of Daddy's since forever, gave me a job at his dress factory in the city. I thought it'd be glamorous, sewing pretty things, maybe meeting a nice boy from the typist pool. The factory was all wearing machines and bolts of fabric, and I took to it fast. But I had this itch. One day, I made a pink dress with a sweetheart neckline and a cinched waist that looked like it was made for a movie star. It wasn't supposed to be mine, but I folded it up, stuffed it in my locker, and lied when the manager asked if anyone saw it go missing. Stupid, right? I thought it was just a harmless thrill, like stealing a candy from the shop. But Uncle John noticed. He called me into his office that evening, the smell of cigar smoke and starch in the air. "Sweetheart," he said, and that term sounded different coming from him then, low, like he was holding something back. "I know what you took." My throat went dry. He told me to get the dress from my locker, and when I came back, he locked the door. "Put it on," he said. I laughed, nervous, thinking it was a joke. But he wasn't smiling. "Or I call the police." "You think your daddy wants that shame?" I froze. The dress felt heavy in my hands. He stepped closer, and I could smell the tobacco on his breath. "Don't make this harder than it is," he said, and there was an edge in his voice I'd never heard before. My fingers fumbled with the buttons of my work shirt. I wanted to yell, to run, but my legs wouldn't move. All I had on was my slip. When the shirt fell to the floor, he just looked, steady, like he was memorizing me. The dress slid over my head, tight at the bust, and when I tied the sash, he let out a breath I didn't know he was holding. "Good girl," he said, and the words made my stomach flip. I hated it. I hated that I didn't hate it more. His eyes lingered on the dip of my collarbone, the way the fabric clung to my waist, and I felt exposed in a way that had nothing to do with the clothes. When he told me to turn around, the command was so quiet I almost missed it, but my body obeyed before my mind could protest. The back of the dress had a low cut, and I felt his hot breath on the nape of my neck as he pretended to adjust the zipper. A shiver ran down my spine, and I squeezed my eyes shut, praying he wouldn't notice the goosebumps rising on my arms. That should have been the end. But it wasn't. A week later, he left a note on my workstation, "New shipment in the storeroom. Try the blue one." No signature, just his scrawl. The storeroom was dim, the dress lying on a crate, sleeveless, the neckline so low it showed the curve of my breasts. I heard the door click behind me. "Color suits you," he said, and his hand brushed my shoulder as he adjusted the strap. I should have pulled away, but I stayed still, feeling his thumb graze my collarbone. "You like this, don't you?" he murmured, and I bit my lip to keep from answering. The truth was, I did, this game of secrets, the way his voice made my skin prickle. His hand lingered, thumb moving in slow circles, and I could feel the warmth of him through the thin fabric. When he stepped closer, his chest almost touching my back, I forgot how to breathe. "Such a pretty thing," he said, more to himself than me, and I felt the weight of his words settle low in my stomach. I wanted to ask what he meant to do, to demand why he was doing this, but my voice had vanished, replaced by the rapid thudding of my heart. The third time was a silk slip, ivory, almost transparent. He had me put it on in his office, the afternoon sun cutting through the blinds in stripes. "Spin," he said, and I did, the fabric whispering against my legs. When he stepped forward, I thought he'd touch me again, but he just reached past me to grab a folder, like it was the most ordinary thing. But his arm brushed my breast, and I gasped. He didn't apologize. He didn't need to. The tension was a living thing now, coiling tighter every time he called me in, every time I let him see me in less fabric, more exposed. That day, he sat at his desk, telling me to turn this way and that, his eyes darkening as the slip rode up my thighs when I moved. "Does it feel good?" he asked, the first time he'd said that, soft, almost a sigh. I didn't answer, but the heat between my legs betrayed me, a throb that matched the rhythm of the machines downstairs. He stood then, rounding the desk, and I thought he'd kiss me, but instead he just adjusted the strap again, his knuckles brushing the swell of my breast. "So obedient," he said, and I didn't know if it was a compliment or a curse. Then came the lingerie, lace and satin, things I'd only seen in catalogs. He had me model them in the back room, near the loading dock, where anyone could walk in if they dared. "Bend over," he said, adjusting the garter belt, his knuckles grazing the back of my thigh. I braced myself on the table, listening to the distant hum of the machines, wondering if anyone could hear my heartbeat. His hand slid up, slow, too slow, and I bit my lip to stifle a sound. "Quiet," he said, but it wasn't a command, it was a promise. And when he finally touched me where I was soaking wet, I didn't pretend to want him to stop. I let myself drown in it, in the shame and the thrill, because somewhere along the way, the pretending had stopped being a lie. That day, we almost got caught. The foreman's voice echoed down the hallway, asking if anyone had seen the boss. I scrambled to pull my skirt on, hands shaking, while Uncle John stepped out, calm as ever, saying he was checking inventory. I stayed hidden, pressed against the wall, listening to their voices fade, the lace of the bra digging into my shoulders. The danger of it, the almost caught, made the ache between my legs worse, and when he came back, his jaw tight, I kissed him first, a reckless thing, born of fear and need. We became a cycle, the notes, the dressing, the touches that grew bolder, hungrier. He was forceful, always taking what he wanted, and I gave it, even as I told myself I hated it. Once, a delivery boy knocked on the door while I was in nothing but a corset, and Uncle John just turned to the desk, calm as anything, as if I wasn't half naked behind him. "Wait outside," he said, and the boy left none the wiser. The danger of almost getting caught, it made it hotter, sick as that sounds. There was a time he had me wear a dress with no panties underneath, just to see if I'd obey, and when I bent to pick up a spool of thread, I saw him look away quickly, his jaw clenched. I knew then he was as undone as I was, that this wasn't just about power or punishment. It was a fire we were both feeding, even if we'd never admit it. The night it went too far, he had me in a black negligee, so sure I might as well have been naked. He'd been drinking, I think, or maybe it was just the way he looked at me, like I was a puzzle he needed to solve. "You've been a good girl," he said, tracing the strap with his finger, down my arm, leaving fire in his wake. I didn't say anything, couldn't. His mouth was on my neck before I could breathe, his hand at the small of my back, pulling me close. I felt his hardness against me, and something snapped. All the guilt, the fear, it turned into something else, something I'd been denying for weeks. He lifted me onto the desk, the wood digging into my thighs, and I clung to him, kissing back like I could burn the world down with it. His hands were everywhere, undoing hooks, sliding fabric aside, and I didn't stop him. I didn't want to. The last thought I had before he claimed me completely was that this was the end of the line, no going back, no pretending this was just about dresses. He unleashed his demon. He was so forceful, like he was about to explode. He bent me over the desk and grabbed my waist hard and lined me up for slaughter. He slid in slowly and it made me want to scream. He took me the way he wanted me, forcefully and deliberate with no inhibitions. He grunted and consumed me like meat. He whispered naughty names to me into my ear as he sped up his rhythm and I was near climax. Then he reached underneath me and grabbed my breasts and I climaxed like a star exploding. I was seeing stars. He sped up and became even more aggressive, not holding back now. He slammed into me so hard and fast I thought was going to faint. Then I heard him grunt louder and he exploded inside of me so hard it felt like someone was punching my stomach from the inside. I can feel the drippings roll down my inner thighs and there was so much of it, it was running down to the floor. I was trembling and breathless as he stood me up, grabbing my shoulders tight. He just looked at me, like he'd found something he'd been searching for all along. But it wasn't over. He took me again, my butt on the desk splayed wide open and slower this time, his mouth moving over every inch of skin the negligee had barely covered, and I lost track of how many times I gasped his name, how many times I begged for more even as I begged for it to stop. But he never did. After that, it was worse, or better, depending on how you look at it. Every night, new outfits, new ways to break me down, to make me crave his touch even as I hated myself for it. There was a red dress with a slit up to my hip that he made me wear while he sat in his chair, smoking, telling me to walk back and forth like a model. "Show me," he'd say, and I knew he didn't mean the dress. Once, he had me wear a corset so tight I could barely breathe, and when he laced it up, his fingers dragged along my spine, making me arch into him. The pain and the pleasure blurred, and I found myself leaning into his touch, craving the pressure, the proof that this was real, that I was seen. The closest we came to disaster was a Tuesday afternoon. I was in his office, wearing nothing but a pair of silk stockings and a bra, his hands on my hips as he kissed down my collarbone. The door was locked, or so we thought, but then we heard voices, Mrs. John's voice, sharp and laughing, talking to the receptionist. Uncle John froze, his mouth still on my skin, and for a heartbeat, we didn't move. Then he pushed me into the closet, shutting the door just as his wife walked in. I listened through the slats, my breath shallow, the smell of his cologne on the coats around me, as she chattered about a dinner party, oblivious to me standing there in nothing but lingerie, dripping with sweat and need. When she left, he opened the door, his face pale, but his eyes dark with something I didn't recognize, relief, maybe, or excitement from the near miss. He didn't say a word, he just kissed me, hard, like he could taste the danger on my lips. I'd started to think maybe this was my life now, the shame and the thrill woven together like the threads I sewed. But then came the final note, slipped under my locker door at closing time. Roof, 10 o'clock. No explanation, just his handwriting. The factory roof was off limits, a rusted ladder leading to a door that always stayed locked. But when I got there, the door was ajar, faint light spilling out. He was waiting by the edge, a single lantern casting shadows over the concrete. Laid out on a folded coat was the most scandalous thing yet, a midnight blue negligee with lace panels that left nothing to the imagination, the kind of thing that would have made Mama faint. "Put it on," he said, and his voice wasn't steady. It was raw, like he'd been fighting something. I hesitated, this was too far, even for us. The roof was open, exposed, anyone could climb that ladder, could see. But his eyes were begging, and I wanted to be the one who made him lose control, just once. The fabric slid over my skin like water, the lace scraping my nipples as I fastened the tiny hooks. When I turned, he was gripping the lantern so tight his knuckles were white. "Come here," he said, and was a stern command. I stepped closer, and he set the lantern down, his hands trembling as they ran up my sides, over the lace, stopping at the curve of my breasts. "You're killing me," he murmured, and then his mouth was on mine, hungry, desperate, like he wanted to devour every gasp, every sigh. His hands moved lower, bunching the negligee around my hips, and I felt the cool night air on my thighs, the rough concrete beneath my back as he laid me down. Somewhere in the distance, a train whistle blew, but all I could focus on was the way he touched me, like he was mapping every inch, determined to memorize me. His mouth trailed down my neck, across my collarbone, and when he sucked at the skin above my breast, I arched into him, unable to stay silent anymore. "Shoo," he said, but his voice was strained, and I knew he didn't really want me to be quiet. He wanted to hear every sound, wanted to know he was doing this to me as he forced his thick thing into me. It was stretching me so wide and I succumbed to his power and force. I was letting him, but I also hated myself for it. I felt his hardness press inside me, insistent, and I wrapped my legs around him, pulling him closer, the lace of the negligee tearing a little under the pressure. He fumbled with the fabric, cursing under his breath, and he continued to ram into me, all at once, and the world went white. I bit his shoulder to keep from screaming, the taste of his shirt, the smell of him, overwhelming me. He moved fast, rough, like he was afraid someone would take this away from us, and I met every thrust, clawing at his back, wanting more, 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 even as the shame whispered that this was wrong, so wrong. He again punched me inside, so hard this time it hurt. We almost didn't hear the footsteps on the ladder. He froze, his largeness still buried deep inside me, stretching me, his breath hot on my neck. Someone called out, "Hey boss, you up here?" It was the night watchman. My heart stopped. Uncle John didn't move, didn't breathe, just held me tighter, his face buried in my hair. The footsteps got closer, the door creaking open. I squeezed my eyes shut, sure we were about to be caught, sure this was the end. But then the watchman sighed, muttering something about kids sneaking up, and the door slammed shut. He pulled back then, looking at me like he'd just seen a ghost, and maybe he had. Maybe we both had. But instead of stopping, he kissed me again, softer now, almost gentle, and moved with a rhythm that was slower, deeper, like he had all the time in the world. It was heaven when he climaxed inside me, again. I came apart in his arms, silent except for the ragged breath in his ear, and when he followed, his body tense against mine, I knew this was the last time. I could feel it in the way he held me afterward, too tight, like he was trying to memorize the shape of me. "I should go," I said, but I didn't move. He didn't answer, just stared at the stars, one hand tracing idle patterns on my hip. The negligee was ruined, torn at the shoulder, but I didn't care. I wanted to stay there forever, in the cold and the dark, where nothing else existed except us and the secret we just made. But we couldn't. We never could. I dressed in silence, the torn lace scratching my skin like a reprimand. He walked me to the ladder, his hand on the small of my back, steadying me, like he'd done 100 times before. But this time, when I looked back, his face was turned away, staring at the lantern's dying light. Mrs. John, well, she was all pearls and ice, sweeping in like a storm the next day. I was in the storeroom, trying on a new design he'd left for me, a crimson dress with a neckline that plunged to my navel, when I heard her voice outside. "What are you hiding, honey?" she asked, and my blood ran cold. I could hear her heels clicking closer, and I fumbled to pull my blouse over the dress, buttons slipping through my fingers. Uncle John's voice was steady, too steady, as he said something about inventory, but I saw the way his hand clenched when she stepped into the room. My heart was in my throat. If she looked at me too long, she'd see the flush on my cheeks, the way my hands trembled. But she just smiled, a brittle thing, and said, "Don't work the girls too hard, dear." I didn't wait to hear more. I packed my things that night, left the city before dawn, and didn't look back. But here's the sick part, I miss it. I miss the notes, the way he'd make me spin, the thrill of being seen, really seen, even if it was wrong. I wonder if he ever thinks about me, the girl who stole a dress and lost herself in the process. Daddy asked why I came back, and I said I missed home. He didn't press, but I think he knows. Some secrets are too loud to hide, even in a small town. I shouldn't have written this. I should burn it, forget it ever happened. But I can't. Maybe it's punishment, letting the world in on my shame. Or maybe it's a cry for help, though I don't know what kind. All I know is that in the silence after, when I close my eyes, I can still feel his hands, guiding me, demanding, and a part of me, the part I'll never admit to anyone, wishes he'd do it again. I wish I could go back to that first night, when he told me to put on the dress, and say no. But I didn't. And now, every time I see a pink dress in a window, or catch a whiff of cigar smoke, I'm right back there, in his office, trembling and wanting, hating myself for how much I liked it. That's the truth, isn't it? I didn't just steal a dress. I stole something else too, my own innocence, maybe, and I don't think I ever want it back.